I have some more palettes of leftover paint from a class that I taught with some kiddos. And I have a homemade sketchbook using cardboard for the cover and then sewn in signatures of different types of paper. And then I have some color swatches inside here that were for a class that I took, but I don't need them anymore. So I'm gonna go ahead and use this spread with this leftover paint to create some really interesting backgrounds that then after it dries, I can work back into. So let me get something to put down this paint with. I think for this one, I just want to do something really fast and quick. So I'm going to go ahead and use my brayer and just kind of get some color down on the page. And some of these palettes were sitting a little longer than I intended them to. So unfortunately, the paint is not in a super great state, but it hasn't dried yet. So I want to make sure that I use it up before it dries up, because there's no sense in not using leftover paint to create interesting papers. Normally I would do this on separate sheets, and I have a lot of paint here, so I might do that too. But this is a sketchbook I haven't worked into a while, and I'd kind of like to have some new pages started that have some interesting things happening on them as a jumping off point for other stuff. Because a lot of times when I do my leftover paint stuff, I do it in a way where I'm kind of using it to create collage papers. So it gives me stuff I can tear up and cut up and then create something new out of that. So this is a different way to go about it. This is using the leftover paint to create some interesting marks and textures on a sketchbook page, a spread, and then I'm going to go ahead and when that dries, work back into that page. And I'll share with you how I do that when I circle back around to this. So most of these colors are kind of the same. It just kind of happens to be what paint palettes were still able to be used, because I saved everything from this class that I taught with kiddos as part of my summer camps that I ran, and I had every intention of doing a ton of this work with all the leftover paint, and unfortunately I got caught up with other projects and just summer schedule. It was just a little busier than I planned on, and I wasn't able to get back to the studio and kind of open up the leftover palettes that I had saved. So some of the paint dried and was lost in the process, but that's okay. I still at least had some where the students had used too much paint on their palettes and then didn't end up needing it for their projects. So I was still able to work with that today in the studio. So I'm gonna use all of it. Whatever's here, I'm gonna work with. And kind of play around with different ways that I can roll it onto the page and create something kind of interesting. If I over roll it, it'll just become a giant muddy mess. I definitely don't want to do that. Like, I want the paint to kind of maintain its integrity as far as the colors go. It's fine that it's mixing some, but if you just really go for it, you're kind of going to lose the whole feel. And right now, this reminds me of action painting and kind of those vibrant abstract, actually more so, it reminds me of abstract expressionism, which is an art media or an art style that I really love from the 1950s and 60s, I think. My brain's tired, so my art history dates might be a little off. But I love abstract expressionism and just the bold play of color and mark and the way that they approached expression in those ways on their canvases. So you think about some of the different abstract expressionists out there and that existed at the time. And actually, if I keep going into this, it's going to get muddled. So we're going to set this one aside. And I still have a little bit of paint left over, so I'm going to see if I have another sketchbook that I can open up and work on. So I'm going to let this dry. This is going to take a while to dry. It might be dry by tomorrow, but the paint is pretty thick in some areas, and it was gummy, like I said, because it was old. So it might take a couple days to really kind of let it get fully dry. See, I have a couple other homemade sketchbooks. These ones I used an old book, and I gutted it, and then I, inserted the the signatures, so the sections of pages that way. Most of this is already filled up for these, but let's see if I have any pages that I could or want to work back into. This one hardly has anything on it. So let's work into this one. I'm gonna keep going with the brayer. Whoops. Because I'm really loving that effect. Kind of see what happens here. I like this page, so I want to be a little careful because I don't really want to add anything more to that page. If something accidentally gets over there, not a big deal. It's just a sketchbook. But my sketchbooks are important to me. They're more than just practice. They're a place where I practice and I explore and I play. But they've really kind of become an important piece of where I make my art. So I don't want to, I'm not afraid to go into it freely and openly and, have something get, not be successful. But when I have a piece I really like, I kind of want to let it exist like that. All right, this is pretty cool. I'm going to let this dry as it is. This one feels like, when you've got those, in the cities, when you have those boards where people can like paste posters and posters and posters over, but then like the weather and time kind of pulls, wears away the papers. That's what this feels like to me. Just kind of a lot of worn away magazine or poster images rather from those different bulletin boards. So pretty cool. All right, set this one aside. And then I have another smaller one. Let's see if this guy, here. This is a page where I just sopped up some ink. Let's have some other ones. Because that already has like something I could work back into. And actually that was over an abandoned sketchbook spread to begin with. Here we go. Here's one that's just completely, oh, you know what? And this one, I can take, these segments come out. I didn't attach them. Instead of sewing them in, I did these kind of bungee things so that the pages can just slide in. So I could actually do a couple of these. Let's see. I like to work back into like my old sketches and turn them into something awesome when they didn't get a chance to kind of become something awesome initially. So let's see if I have any that could use a little help. I don't have a ton of paint left on my palettes, but I do have a bunch of old paint that my mom gave me. She was trying to kind of clear out some stuff. So this is just different craft paint that had gotten left at her house from my niece as she, grew up and kind of was growing up and spent a lot of time there and wanted to kind of do different projects at my mom's house. So it's an abandoned paint, but these are really old and kind of gummy. So it'll be kind of fun to use it up this way. I have a lot of that. I've accumulated a lot of different like little bottles of craft paint like this over the years, and I was doing different projects. And as a typical artist and art teacher, that also means that I'm a little bit of a hoarder when it comes to potential art supplies. So I ended up with a lot of, oh, look at that, that's so gross. This is not supposed to come out of the bottle like that. We're gonna throw this guy away when we're done with this. But I had a ton of craft paint that was in really great shape, but then I didn't use it for a lot of years. And unfortunately, whoops, when you don't use it, it goes bad. So that's kind of what's happened to my niece's paints, which is why, it's a good thing my mom was getting rid of them on her behalf. But they just, if you still have some lying around, you could absolutely do something like this with them and then get rid of them. Just kind of give yourself your space back. So these are in very strange, much different consistencies than the ones that were left over on my students' palettes. That's okay. All right. kind of a mess, but it's at least adding some interest to a sketchbook that needs a little interest. And then here's a page that has nothing going on. So let's see if there's any of this teal left in here that wants to come out and play. Ooh, could have shaken that up longer. That's okay. So what am I going to do when I come back into these pages? I'm going to, you could come in with Sharpie if you had some lighter color areas. You could come in with paint pens, acrylic pens. I love coming in with white. If there's a lot of dark color happening, that's a really great idea. You could go back into it with colored pencil. You could collage back into it. You know, in the end, all of these are in a sketchbook. I could still tear them out and turn them into collage papers if I wanted to. I feel like I have a lot of collage paper, so I'm kind of looking for some new ways to approach techniques that I love that aren't going to just kind of like add more to my stash. Night. Love you. All right, that's good. I'm going to avoid that green. That green is past its prime for sure. What if I can get some more? The white's been absorbed by everything else. That's okay. All right. A little red? Nah. It's gone. Okay, cool. So now I have a bunch of textured papers in sketchbooks that I can now draw back into, paint back into, collage into, and approach using up leftover paint in a new way. So I'm going to let these all dry, and then I'll circle back and show you how I work back into these pages in my sketchbooks. You could also do this on canvas. You could do this on a sheet of paper. As long as it's thick enough thick enough material to kind of withstand throwing some paint on it, should work out great.